The morning sun spilled over the vast expanse of Abraham's camp, bathing the tents in golden light. The aroma of freshly baked bread drifted through the air, mingling with the sounds of livestock and servants preparing for the day. But inside one particular tent, time seemed to stand still. Sarah, now well past her childbearing years, cradled in her arms something she had long believed impossible, her newborn son. The baby, warm and soft against her skin, let out a tiny whimper, causing her to press him closer. Her wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she traced his delicate features. Laughter bubbled from her lips, laughter not of doubt as it had been before, but of overflowing joy. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Isaac. That was the name Abraham had given the child, meaning he laughs. It was a fitting name, for Sarah's laughter had once been bitter, full of disbelief when she first overheard the Lord's promise. But now her laughter was rich with faith, the sound of a soul overwhelmed by the goodness of God. Outside, Abraham stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed at the tent, his heart swelling with gratitude. He was now 100 years old, and the fulfillment of God's covenant lay wrapped in swaddling clothes inside. Every wrinkle on his weathered face told a story of waiting, of longing, of trusting beyond reason. But amid the rejoicing, shadows loomed. The celebration of Isaac's weaning was a grand affair. Feasting, music, and laughter filled the camp as friends and family gathered. But not all hearts rejoiced. Hagar, the Egyptian servant, stood at a distance, her eyes narrowing as she watched her son Ishmael observing Isaac. The young teenager's expression twisted, and a smirk played on his lips as he murmured something under his breath. It was subtle, perhaps a joke, a mocking remark, but it did not go unnoticed. Sarah's gaze sharpened. The moment she saw Ishmael's disdainful glance toward Isaac, something deep and primal rose within her. This was the son of the slave woman, the child who could not share in the inheritance meant for her son. She turned sharply to Abraham. Her voice was calm, but the fire in her eyes left no room for argument. She said, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham's heart clenched. Ishmael was his flesh and blood too. He had loved him, raised him, and watched him grow into a strong young man. How could he simply send him away? But that night, as he wrestled with his turmoil, the voice of God spoke. "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." At dawn, Abraham placed a skin of water and some food upon Hagar's shoulders. She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face for some sign that this was a mistake, that he would change his mind. But his silence told her all she needed to know. With Ishmael by her side, she stepped into the wilderness, her heart pounding with every step away from her home. The sun was relentless, bearing down on them as they wandered aimlessly through the desert of Beersheba. The water ran out quickly, and exhaustion claimed Ishmael first. Hagar, despairing, laid her son beneath the shade of a bush, unable to watch him die. She collapsed a short distance away, her body shaking as sobs racked her frame. Then God's voice spoke from heaven. "What is the matter?" "Hagar, do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." She lifted her head, eyes wide with wonder. Before her, a well shimmered in the desert heat, a provision from the Almighty. She rushed to Ishmael, giving him water, and in that moment she knew he would survive. And just as the Lord had promised, he would become a great nation. Years passed. Isaac grew into a young man, strong and full of life, the joy of his father's heart. The bond between Abraham and his son was unbreakable. But then one night the voice of God shattered the peace. "Abraham." "Here I am," he answered, sitting up in his tent, the hairs on his arms standing on end. Then came the unthinkable. "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Abraham's breath caught in his throat. His only son, the one through whom God had promised descendants as numerous as the stars, was to be sacrificed? The very thought sent daggers through his heart. But if God had spoken, he would obey. Before dawn he rose, saddled his donkey, and took 2 servants along with Isaac. For 3 days they traveled, 3 days of silence, of turmoil, of prayers whispered into the night. Every step was agony. Every glance at Isaac was another stab in his heart. Yet when Moriah's peaks came into view, Abraham turned to his servants and, in a voice both steady and full of faith, said, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." We will come back. Did he believe that? Perhaps he did. The author of Hebrews later wrote that Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead. Isaac, carrying the wood for the sacrifice on his back, glanced up at his father. "Father?" he asked, his voice soft with curiosity. "The fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" A lump rose in Abraham's throat, but his answer came swift and sure. "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." At the summit, Abraham built the altar. Every stone he placed felt like a death sentence. His hands trembled as he bound Isaac, laying him atop the wood. Tears blurred Abraham's vision as he raised the knife high above his son's chest. His heart thundered in his ears. Then God's voice from heaven, "Abraham! Abraham!" His grip loosened, his breath caught. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," the voice said. "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." And there, caught in a thicket, was a ram the Lord had provided. With great relief, Abraham sacrificed the ram instead, naming the place, "The Lord will provide." As Abraham and Isaac descended the mountain, the sky stretched vast above them, the promise of God now written in their hearts. Faith had been tested, and faith had prevailed. As Abraham and Isaac made their way down the slopes of Mount Moriah, they did not know yet of God's plan to save mankind. One that would not be fully understood for centuries. The sacrifice had been averted, but the lesson remained. God himself would provide. The events of that fateful day on Mount Moriah were not isolated. They were threads in a grand story unfolding from the dawn of creation to the day when another father would lead his son to another altar. This was not merely a test of Abraham's faith. It was a foreshadowing of the gospel, a living prophecy of the sacrifice that would one day change the world. Abraham was asked to offer his beloved son, just as God the Father would later offer his only begotten son. Isaac carried the wood for his own sacrifice, just as Jesus carried his own cross to Golgotha. The location of this test was not random. Mount Moriah, the very place where Isaac was nearly sacrificed, was the same region where, centuries later, Solomon would build the temple of the Lord. It was there that countless sacrifices for sin would be offered on the altar. And just beyond those temple walls, on another hill called Calvary, the greatest sacrifice of all would take place. The parallels are undeniable. Isaac was spared, but Jesus was not. The Father did not hold back his knife, he let it fall. Jesus was the lamb caught in the thicket, the true substitute, the sacrifice that Abraham had only glimpsed in shadows. The prophet Isaiah would later write, "But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities, he was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth." And yet, unlike Isaac, who had been bound in helplessness, Jesus laid down his life willingly. "No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord." Isaac was the son of promise, the one through whom God had said the nations would be blessed. But Jesus was the greater son of promise, the true seed of Abraham, the one in whom all the peoples of the earth would be saved. The author of Hebrews, writing centuries after Abraham's test, looked back on that moment with awe. He saw it not merely as a historical event, but as a defining moment of faith, faith that shaped the destiny of a nation and of all who would believe in Christ. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Here was the key. Abraham believed in resurrection before there had ever been one. And in a way, Isaac was given back to him as though raised from the dead. But Jesus, he truly was raised. On the third day after his sacrifice, just as Abraham and Isaac had traveled 3 days to Moriah, Christ emerged from the grave, triumphant over death. The story of Abraham and Isaac is more than a moment of faith. It is a call to trust in the God who provides. It is a challenge to surrender what we hold most dear, knowing that God's plan is greater than our own. Like Abraham, we are often asked to lay something precious on the altar, a dream, a relationship, a future we thought was certain. And yet, just as he did for Abraham, God will also provide for those who believe in him. For he has already given us the greatest provision of all, his Son, Jesus Christ. And through him we have everything.